Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You are listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. And as always, I'm your host, the Game Master. And today we're talking about Superman. Faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. This amazing stranger from the planet Krypton, the Man of Steel. Disguised as mild mannered Clark Kent, Superman fights a never ending battle for truth and justice. The prologue to today's story takes place in one of many possible futures. A future where a villain named King Cosmos conquers the Earth and then brings about its destruction. King Cosmos then uses his phenomenal cosmic power to travel back in time. Another traveler through time is Superboy, who's a member of the Legion of Superheroes in the 30th century. As Superboy flies backwards to his own time period, King Cosmos follows him. Their journey eventually brings them to Smallville, Kansas, where King Cosmos attacks the Boy of Steel. King Cosmos, by the way, is a Jack Kirby style villain who wears green and gold armor, and he has the ability to alter reality. As such, he can make Superboy weaker and he can make himself stronger. Knowing that if anyone were to stand in his way of conquering the Earth, it would be Kal-El of Krypton, he tries to kill Superboy now in the 1930s, changing the course of history to his own selfish benefit. But mustering every last bit of his power, Superboy uses a rare ability that he hardly ever uses, which he refers to as his supernova. In one moment, Superboy empties all the solar energy he's absorbed. King Cosmos is defeated, but now Superboy is completely powerless. He begins the slow process of absorbing yellow sun radiation again, starting over from square one. Then we get into the main plot of today's adventure, which takes place in 1938, when Clark Kent has the following stats in DC Heroes: Dex 13, Strength 11, Body 10, Intelligence 9, Willpower 12, Mind 10, Influence 10, Aura 8, Spirit 10. And also, as of 1938, the only powers he has are extended hearing, invulnerability, jumping, running, super speed, telescopic vision, and X ray vision. And that's it. No flight, no heat vision, just the small amount of yellow sunlight that he's been able to absorb thus far. Disguised as mild mannered Clark Kent, our hero finds himself in Cleveland, Ohio, at the offices of the Daily Star newspaper, where the editor, George Taylor, calls Clark Kent into his office. Clark says, "You wanted to see me, Chief?" Mr. Taylor asks if he's ever heard of Superman. Clark is shocked. Taylor says, "Reports have been streaming in that a fellow with gigantic strength named Superman exists. I'm making it your assignment to cover these reports. Think you can handle it, Kent?" Clark says, "Listen, Chief, if I can't find out anything about this Superman, then no one can." As Clark exits the office of Mr. Taylor, one of the Daily Star's other employees receives a tip over the phone that someone is beating their wife at 211 Court Avenue. So Clark says, "I'm on my way." But it's not Clark who gets there, it's Superman. He catches a burly man using a belt on his wife. When this man sees Superman, he asks what he wants. So Superman makes a dex check and grapples with the man, then a strength check, easily lifting the man over his head using his right arm. The abuser says, "Don't get tough." And Superman says, "Tough is putting mildly the treatment you're going to get." Then he throws the man into the wall, shattering the plaster. Superman's strength of 11 means that when the man hits the wall, he takes 7 points of damage. So he is knocked out. Superman hears police sirens, so he changes back into Clark Kent. When the cops arrive, the policeman says, "What are you doing here?" Clark says, "Hello, Captain. I've arrived to find the place like this. It looks like our friend Superman had dropped in to pay a visit. Police ask to see Clark's identification, and he shows them that he's with the Daily Star, so they allow him to leave. He then returns to the Daily Star, where Lois Lane is working as a secretary, fighting to become a reporter. But most of the men here in 1938 think that's no job for a woman. Clark asks Lois out on a date, and she says, I suppose I'll give you a break for a change. So that night, they go dancing at a place called the Roadhouse. Clark's wearing a dapper black suit with a white dress shirt and a red tie. Lois is wearing a slinky red dress. Three thugs at a nearby table spot Lois and like what they see. One of them, a man named Butch, says he's going to cut in. The second man asks what if her date doesn't like it, and Butch says that if he gets nasty, he'll knock his face in. The third man says this is going to be good. Butch tells Clark to run along, saying that he's cutting in. Clark says no, and Butch says, are you trying to get Flip? Scram if you know what's good for you. Lois says, Clark, are you going to stand for this? Clark reluctantly adheres to his role as a weakling. He says, be reasonable, Lois. Dance with the fellow, and then we'll leave right away. But Lois says, you can stay and dance with him if you want, but I'm leaving. She slaps the thug and then storms out. Clark catches up to her getting into a cab and says, but Lois. Lois says, you asked me earlier this evening why I avoid you at the office. Well, I'll tell you. You're a spineless, unbearable coward. Butch says, I'll show that skirt she can't make a fool out of Butch Matson. And he and his goons follow Lois. Clark sees this and says, this looks like a job for Superman. He changes into his costume and follows them. When Butch and his men catch up to the taxi, they slam their car into it, forcing it off the road. They yank Lois out of the taxi, and she screams at him, let me go. But Butch tells her to shut up and get in the car. They force Lois into the back seat of their green 1937 DeSoto. The thugs speed down the road and talk about what a coward Clark was. One of them says, I hope I run into him again real soon. And ironically, their headlights reveal that Superman is standing in their path with his fists on his hips. Superman jumps into the air and the car speeds underneath him. When Superman lands on the road, he turns and begins to chase the goons. One of them tells Butch to step on the gas, and Butch refers to Superman as the devil himself. Butch's car streaks down the road like a rocket, but it's easily overtaken by the Man of Steel. Superman then lifts the car over his head. At this point in his life, Superman, by the way, can bench press 2 tons. A 1937 DeSoto weighs 3,150 pounds. Lois's weight brings that up to just a tad under 3,300 pounds, and the three goons make the total weight 3,900 pounds. So Clark sweats a little, lifting them all. He then turns the car on its side, shaking them out. As Lois falls and the weight has been lowered, Clark holds the car with his right hand and he catches Lois with his left. Once she's safely on the ground and the three goons are running away, our hero smashes the car into a nearby rock. Then he uses his super speed to catch up to Butch, pick him up, leap up onto a telephone pole, and hang Butch by the seat of his pants. Superman walks over to Lois, telling her not to be afraid and promising he won't hurt her. Bearing Lois in his arms, Superman then leaps back towards Cleveland, depositing her on the outskirts of town. The next morning, she hurries into Mr. Taylor's office at the Daily Star and tells him the whole story. Mr. Taylor just grins and says, are you sure it wasn't pink elephants you saw? Furious, Lois manages to bite her tongue and return to her desk where she goes back to typing. When Clark Kent walks over to apologize, Lois treats him colder than ever. I'm sorry about last night. Please don't be angry with me, he says sheepishly, but Lois ignores him. Then we get into the epilogue of this adventure. Superman's long jump can take him about 800 yards per leap. Using this ability, he heads to Washington, D.C., where Congress is discussing the situation in Europe. One speaker says that Germany, Italy, Great Britain, and France are about to sign the Munich Agreement, which will force the Czech Republic to cede the Sudetenland, including key Czechoslovakian military defense positions, to Germany. Senator Barrows then proposes a bill which Clark Kent finds to be suspicious. When Barrows leaves Congress, he is approached by a slick lobbyist named Alex Greer. Greer's loyalty is not to America, and he bribed Barrows to try to get America involved in Europe. Barrows tells Greer to never talk to him in public, and Clark uses a camera from the Daily Star to photograph the two of them together. Clark then visits a local Washington newspaper where he asks who Greer is, but they tell him not much is known about him. So, as Superman, he does a stakeout of Barrows' home that evening. He overhears Greer and Barrows talking, revealing everything. So Superman snatches Greer up, and away, frightening him half to death. Greer confesses, and for now, the United States stays out of Europe's affairs. World War II, though, is right around the corner. But that's a story for another day. We hope that you enjoyed today's game session. If so, smash that like button, make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell for notifications, and as always, be sure to leave us a comment, as that really helps us out with the YouTube algorithm. I hope you guys have a good one, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye.